Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. The Supreme Court is hearing a high-profile case challenging limits on campaign financing. What role Vice President J.D. Vance plays in this case? A federal judge in New York allows the unsealing of grand jury documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Well, we can expect to see those records soon. The White House says the economy is showing all the right signals as President Trump heads to Pennsylvania to talk about affordability. The Fed is expected to move forward with another rate cut this week. How that decision could affect you and what President Trump says about the key test for a new Fed chair nominee. Nvidia has gained approval from the U.S. government to sell its more advanced H200 chips to China, though some critics say the move may hurt national security. We take a look at that, plus the DOJ uncovered a scheme to smuggle Nvidia chips worth more than $100 million to China, despite export bans. And Miami heads to the polls today in a high-stakes mayoral runoff with big-name endorsements and major issues like taxes, housing, and safety on the line.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Tuesday, December 9th. I'm Stephanie Cox. The Supreme Court is hearing a high-profile case today involving campaign financing, and Vice President J.D. Vance has a stake in the case. Vance is among those challenging limits on how much party committees can spend in coordination with candidates. The current law restricts such spending to around $4 million for Senate races and $127,000 for at-large House seats. Vance filed the challenge when he was a Senate candidate. Other challengers include the National Republican Senatorial Committee and the National Republican Congressional Committee. They want to get rid of the limits on spending altogether. The Trump administration supports the challenge, but the lawyer defending the law argues the challenge should be dismissed because Vance is no longer a political candidate. And a federal judge in New York is allowing the Justice Department to unseal grand jury documents in the sex trafficking case of Ghislaine Maxwell. She's a longtime confidant of Jeffrey Epstein, and she's currently in jail. U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmayer made the ruling today based on the Epstein Files Transparency Act, passed last month. This means the records could be made public within 10 days. Engelmayer is the second judge to allow the Justice Department to publicly disclose previously secret Epstein court records. Last week, a federal judge in Florida allowed the release of transcripts from an abandoned federal grand jury investigation into Epstein in the 2000s. Another request to release records from Epstein's 2019 sex trafficking case is still pending in New York. And a long-running legal battle over the Biden administration's student aid and verification exemption program, known as SAVE, has finally come to an end. In a press release today, the department unveiled a settlement agreement with the state of Missouri. It says student loan borrowers in the SAVE plan, called forbearance, must choose a new repayment plan. Under the proposed settlement, the SAVE lawsuits would be dismissed. In return, the Education Department would stop enrolling new borrowers in SAVE. It would also move all current SAVE borrowers into legal repayment plans. The entire SAVE plan has been blocked since February, and an appeals court sided with Republican-led states who argued that former President Joe Biden did not have the authority to create the plan. As of July, the department has identified more than 7 million borrowers enrolled in the SAVE forbearance program. And it's day 5 of the evidentiary hearing in the Luigi Mangione case. Mangione has been accused of murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. His defense is claiming that police conducted an illegal search and seizure. We turn now to our reporter, Arlene Richards, who's been in the courtroom this morning. Arlene, good to see you again. The proceedings started a little late this morning. Before we get into who's on the stand, go over for us what the defense is claiming and what testimony so far may support their claim.
Well, good afternoon, Steph. Yes, I have been in the courtroom this morning. They did get a late start. But as far as what the defense is claiming, as you said, they're claiming that there was an illegal search and seizure. And they're saying this because at some point in the incident that happened at McDonald's, they actually did start the search of the backpack. But this was after Luigi Mangione was read his Miranda rights and he was handcuffed and placed into official custody. They began the search, and one of the officers, Officer Wasser, found a magazine clip, which is bullets, right? Ammunition. She found the ammunition, and at some point, one of the other officers said, well, we'd better stop here and put everything back in the bag and take it to the station to continue the search. And then another officer, they started to have a conversation, and another officer said, I think at this point, we need to get a search warrant. His supervisor said, no, we don't need the search warrant. This is a search incident to arrest. But the other officer kind of pushed back and said, well, we already know who he is, meaning that they knew that he was probably likely the person that the New York police were looking for in the CEO shooting. So that's why they're claiming now that this was an illegal search because of what this officer said, I believe.
Now, which officer was testifying when you left the courtroom, and what did he say?
So this was Officer Stephen Fox. He was a patrolman who was in the K-9 unit. He testified that he heard the dispatch talk about McDonald's manager calling and saying that some of the customers believe they see the man who conducted the shooting or who did the shooting in New York, or that New York police were looking for. He said he waited a little while, he listened a little longer, and then he heard that they couldn't find the ID that he had provided. And at that point, he went to the McDonald's on his own. And when he got there, at some point, he was the person that actually read Mangione his rights, read him his Miranda rights. He's the one who handcuffed him and placed him in detention, what they call detention. And detention is when you're temporarily placed on hold, meaning that you can't leave, but they are conducting an investigation. So he wasn't quite under arrest yet, but he was detained. And then he's also the officer that was there while the search was being conducted. And he was the one who said, we'd better stop now and put things back and take it back to the station. Now, he explained that the reason why he said that was because he didn't want anything else to become contaminated, and as far as taking things out and putting them on the table. He said that could contaminate them, and at the station would be a safer environment. And he was also concerned about them finding more ammunition or guns or knives or whatever, because he knew that this was the man that likely the New York police were looking for. So he wanted to make sure everyone was safe and that they would take it back to the station for search.
Okay, and did he provide any more testimony regarding the actual search of the backpack and the defense's claim that they needed a warrant?
Yes, he explained that this was incident to arrest, and that the officer who was concerned about it, Officer Trent, who talked about how he thinks they should get a search warrant, he was speaking to his supervisor, and the supervisor has rank, and the supervisor said, no, this is a search incident to arrest. This is Pennsylvania law, and they were following Pennsylvania law. So as far as Officer Fox is concerned, Trent made a mistake. He misspoke, or he didn't understand the law at the time. And once the supervisor speaks, that's who they follow. So it was a search incident to arrest. They took the bag back to the station. They continued the search, and that's where they found the gun and some other items. And so he's saying that it wasn't unlawful for them to search the bag to begin with, because at that point, Mangione had been placed officially under arrest, and that means that they can search his body or any items that he has around him at the time. So we were on break when I came out for this, and I believe when I go back in, Officer Fox will continue, because they're going through the body cam footage as they've done with all of the officers, and he will continue to talk about the search and what happened probably at the station. Steph?
Much scrutiny on these fine points today, and looking forward to hearing more updates from you. Arlene Richards, thank you so much. Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman is running for governor of New York. The Long Island Republican's entry into the race pits him against fellow GOP candidate Representative Elise Stefanik. President Trump has yet to endorse a candidate, but calling both Blakeman and Stefanik great people. Former New York Governor George Pataki was the state's last Republican governor. Pataki served 3 terms from 1995 to 2006. Blakeman's announcement comes as incumbent Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, faces a primary challenge from her own Lieutenant Governor, Antonio Delgado. And Miami voters head to the polls today for a runoff election to choose the city's next mayor. The race pits former County Commissioner Eileen Higgins against retired Colonel Emilio Gonzalez, a former city manager. 13 candidates were on the November 4th ballot, but none gained the majority needed to win. The election saw Higgins with nearly 40% of the vote and Gonzalez with just under 20%. But early voting suggests the gap is narrowing. Gonzalez has received endorsements from President Trump and Governor Ron DeSantis, while Higgins is backed by former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Key issues include property tax reform, public safety, affordable housing, and infrastructure improvements. The outcome could signal shifts in Miami's political landscape ahead of the 2026 midterms. And Indiana's Senate Elections Committee has advanced a bill to redraw the state's congressional map. It will now move forward a final floor vote expected later this week. The proposal favors the GOP. It was introduced last week and already passed by the state House. Support for the redistricting remains uncertain despite Republican control of the chamber. Several GOP senators are hesitant or opposed. Monday's 3-6 committee vote followed hours of testimony. Supporters argue the map responds to changes in national redistricting trends. Opponents warn it could dilute representation and set a new precedent for future cycles. A final Senate vote is expected Thursday. And some positive economic numbers are setting the backdrop for President Trump's visit to Pennsylvania today. The White House cited what it called strong economic news, saying that national average gas prices dipped below $3 last week for the first time in 4 years, and median rents for U.S. apartments have fallen 4 straight months. Consumer confidence has also begun to rise, according to a national index. U.S. Small Business Administrator Kelly Loeffler reacts on Bloomberg.
This is the Trump agenda. This is deregulation. He's already deregulated to the tune of $200 billion. That's a saving of $2,000 per family. That's just a start. We're cutting about 30 regulations for every new regulation. When I talk to small businesses, they say they were crushed under Biden's regulatory regime, Green New Deal that raised costs, not just through his executive orders, but through the agencies, which added additional trillions. So between tax cuts, deregulation, fair trade, we see jobs and opportunities coming back to America, and then $18 trillion of investment coming in. A lot of that's going to play out on Main Street.
Some economic challenges remain. Electricity prices in Pennsylvania are climbing for winter. First-time homebuyers face record high entry costs, and voters continue to voice concerns about tariffs, healthcare premiums, and the overall cost of living. Trump's stop in Mount Pocono is already sparking intense partisan messaging ahead of the 2026 governor's race and key House contests. Republicans say the president is lowering prices for working families, while Democrats argue his policies are driving costs higher. We'll have more updates for you. Next, the Federal Open Market Committee is meeting today and tomorrow. That's the Federal Reserve panel that decides interest rates. As its members look at economic data, they might also have an eye on the Supreme Court. Here's a look at why and how it might affect you.
The Federal Reserve might seem far away, but it impacts people at home, including the cost of literal homes. Today, the Fed is starting a 2-day meeting in which it's expected to cut the federal funds rate. That would put downward pressure on interest rates for mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, and other debt. The central bank also tries to balance maximum employment with control of inflation. In other words, it affects people's jobs and the prices they pay. But many experts predict just a 1/4 point cut tomorrow.
We shouldn't look to the Federal Reserve to solve all of our ills or believe that a small shift in interest rates can make a big difference.
The Supreme Court is considering a case that could affect the Fed. It challenges President Donald Trump's firing of a former FTC commissioner. The case could affect his power over other independent agencies like the Fed. A hearing yesterday suggests most justices might side with Trump.
Independent agencies are not accountable to the people.
There is no such thing in our constitutional order as a fourth branch of government that's quasi-judicial and quasi-legislative.
President Trump discussed the Federal Reserve in an new interview. He said support for immediately cutting interest rates would be a requirement for anyone he chooses to lead the agency. The comment came in a Politico interview released today.
Is it a litmus test that the new chair lower interest rates immediately?
Yes. Well, this guy should too, but I think he's a combination of not a smart person and doesn't like Trump. But
so
the
you've
reason he
spoken
doesn't
with your
like
potential.
Trump, well, the reason he doesn't like Trump is because I hit him hard because he's doing a bad job.
So you've talked to your potential candidates.
We're fighting through interest rates. Look, he's a negative, but this country is doing so well. Again, we have $18 trillion being invested. Car companies are moving back that left us years ago. AI is coming in at levels never seen before. Factories are opening up all over the country.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell's leadership term ends in May, and Trump is expected to announce a successor early in the new year. The Senate Banking Committee will hold a hearing to vet the nominee, followed by a confirmation vote in the full Senate. Also during the Politico interview, President Trump praised the economy, giving it an A++, and said prices are falling across the board. He credited his administration's deregulation, tax cuts, and trade policies with bringing jobs and investment back to America. On health care, he remained non-committal about extending Obamacare subsidies, with premiums expected to spike in 2026. The president says Americans will get the money to buy the insurance they want. And President Trump has unveiled a $12 billion economic assistance package for farmers. Joining us to discuss is Brian Reisinger, a farmer himself and journalist, and the author of Land Rich, Cash Poor. Good to have you with us today. Welcome.
Good to be with you.
Now, as a farmer, your reaction to begin with to the announcement today?
Yeah, absolutely. A farm like the one I grew up on grows not only soybeans, but a wide variety of different crops, and we're always working to diversify. The reality is that so many traditional farms like ours and so many other farms that are locked further into crops like soybeans and other things that are traded globally are really held hostage by China. And in this case, that hostage season was all of harvest season. So that was a real challenge. And soybean farmers ended up locking in losses because the soybean price was lower because of the snub that China was carrying out against American farmers during these negotiations. And it was a real challenge. It's something that has an impact on farmers this year and going forward. And, in a world where we're losing so many farms so rapidly, what China did really was incredibly damaging to keeping family farms going in this country.
And not only those trade tensions, over the weekend, Trump signed an executive order creating a task forces to protect competition across the U.S. food supply chain. But yesterday, dumping from other countries was mentioned as an active threat to U.S. farmers. And I recall last time we spoke, you said China could force soybean prices down in the U.S. What are some of the other threats U.S. farmers are currently facing?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right about all of those threats. And I think that the aid package that was announced is a step forward in the right direction. The other threats relate to just making sure that we don't allow ourselves to be in this position with global trade in the future, whether it's China or other countries, not letting any one country hold such a massive amount of the share that they're buying of a particular crop so that they can't hold us hostage. And the steps to make sure that markets domestically are fair as well, that there's proper competition in all of our markets across the country are really important. More broadly than that, we face the threat of China buying up farmland, which is a growing threat as we have more and more farms disappear. The farm that my dad is still operating, my sister's working to take over, that we all work on together, is an example of a way to hold the line against that threat, because small family farms like ours are far less likely to sell to a foreign adversary like China than, say, a company that owns a whole bunch of farmland that has no responsibility other than to their shareholders. So those are threats. And from there, just the general squeeze of rising costs and prices that don't necessarily keep up with that just continue to make it harder and harder for family farms to make it each year, regardless of what's going on in the global economy.
And what's it going to take to help family farms remain? Hold on.
The real big shift that we need to the big shift that we need to make is the shift toward more entrepreneurial opportunity for our farms. And I think making sure that our markets domestically, internationally are fair is a big part of that. The other big part of it is making sure that American innovation can reach farms of all sizes. So much technology that's pioneered, whether it's private sector or wherever, is geared toward the biggest of the big farms, the big dollar equipment. What we need is more and more farm equipment and other technology that is what they call scale neutral, meaning it can work for small and medium-sized farms as well as large farms, so that all farms, whether their size or type, are able to innovate and adopt the latest practices and technologies, allowing our family farms to be able just as efficient as anybody else across the globe.
And so we've been talking also here about diversifying agricultural trade away from China. The administration is also looking at that and how to strengthen bonds with more friendly nations. What would that take, and what challenges are currently in the way of that?
Yeah, the biggest thing that it will take is gearing our trade strategy to be around individual products and individual countries. What I mean by that is think about NAFTA as the opposite of that. One of the reasons that NAFTA has been so criticized by people in both parties over the years is because it was a great big deal with great big countries across multiple countries. So you're negotiating not just on crops, multiple crops, but multiple agriculture sectors, and then manufacturing, rare earth minerals, all kinds of things can go into any one of these great big trade deals. So the farmer gets shoved to the back of the line pretty quick. So if we can find a way to have more targeted trade deals, narrower trade deals with individual countries or on individual products, that way you can make sure that whether it's, folks growing beef, whether it's, folks raising tomatoes, whatever it is, you're able to have a deal that can benefit family farmers and put family farmers first. That's the big thing that we need to do. And the barriers to that are just simply the pressure that people put on America to continue what we were doing throughout the 90s, which is allowing our farmers and our workers to get ripped off without having tougher trade deals. So we need to resist that pressure and try to make sure we're negotiating these deals in a way that puts family farms first going forward.
And looking at this issue of Chinese ownership of U.S. farmland, I know lawmakers on both sides have been working on it, especially from a national security standpoint. But from your perspective on the ground as a farmer, what do you see as the challenges and the need to do this, to protect those lands?
Yeah, the real big challenge for families like ours is transparency. No farmer that I know wants to hear, hey, I'm from the Chinese Communist Party, I'm here to buy your land. That's not going to happen. But the reality of the situation is that in so many cases, a lot of these companies tie back to the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, without it being clear. There isn't transparency for people to know what's going on. So that's the biggest thing we can do, is that transparency. And then from there, the rest of our solutions to try to help family farms move forward, again, is going to be a good guard against that. Because if our family farms are guarded with transparency to know who's trying to buy their land, and they're able to continue forward in an economical way, that means they don't have to sell to bigger and bigger companies that might in turn flip it to China. This is the best bulwark we can have, is the American family farmer armed with transparent, accountable information to be able to hold on to their land.
All right. Well, great to have your insights and your time today. Thank you so much, Brian Reisinger. Good to speak with you.
Good to be with you.
And next, President Trump says he will allow Nvidia's H200 processors, the company's second best AI chips, to be exported to China. In a Truth Social post yesterday, Trump said he informed Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping about the move and that he responded positively. Here are the details on that.
This is DGX1.
President Donald Trump on Monday said Nvidia will be allowed to sell its H200 artificial intelligence chips to China, but at a price. The U.S. government will collect a 25% fee for each chip exported, higher than the 15% floated in August. A White House official says it will be collected as an import tax from Taiwan, where the chips are made, before they undergo U.S. security checks and head to China. Nvidia shares jumped after Trump's announcement on Truth Social, up 2% after hours, following a 3% rise earlier on reports of the deal. Trump added that the U.S. Commerce Department is finalizing details of the deal, and the same approach would apply to other AI chip firms such as AMD and Intel. The move appears to settle debate over whether American chip makers should sell to China or hold back to protect U.S. dominance in AI. However, critics in Washington say shipping high-end AI chips to China risks supercharging its military. Democratic senators criticized the decision, calling it a major economic and national security failure. Experts say Nvidia's H200 is nearly 6 times more powerful than the H20, which is the most advanced chip currently allowed for export to China. But it's still slower than Nvidia's Blackwell chips, which U.S. firms use for AI training and deployment.
In more news involving chips to China, 2 Chinese nationals are now in custody, accused of trafficking Nvidia H100 and H200 processors. Prosecutors say they worked with employees at a Hong Kong logistics firm and a China-based AI company. Officials say the aim was to evade U.S. export controls. The individuals allegedly used straw buyers and false claims that the chips were bound for American or third country customers. The chips were routed through U.S. warehouses where labels were swapped to hide their origin. And in a separate case, U.S. officials say they've dismantled another China-linked network that moved more than $160 million worth of restricted Nvidia AI chips. 2 businessmen were arrested, and a Houston company and its owner have already pleaded guilty. And President Trump is threatening Mexico with higher tariffs, saying the country is treating America's farmers unfairly. The issue is water rights. The president accuses Mexico of violating a 1944 treaty that details water distribution from the Colorado, Tijuana, and Rio Grande rivers. In a social media post, President Trump accused Mexico of under-delivering water and threatened to impose an additional 5% tariff. He says the lack of water is harming Texas farmers' ability to grow crops and raise cattle. Texas is currently suffering from a drought. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said Mexican officials will meet with their U.S. counterparts later today. She said she expects to reach an agreement with the U.S. over the water dispute. Mexico is the United States' largest trading partner. The current tariff is 25%, but the vast majority of goods are exempt under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. And President Trump defending his directive to strike drug boats as Democrats and reporters continue to press him to release footage of a second strike that killed 2 alleged smugglers. The president outlines to reporters why he says the strikes are needed in the first place. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports. The department says the Trump administration has revoked 85,000 visas since January. That's more than double last year's total. The total includes more than 8,000 student visas. A department official said crimes like DUI, assault, and theft account for nearly half of the revocations. Other cases involve overstays and alleged national security concerns. Some of the revocations have sparked First Amendment concerns, especially involving international students tied to protests over the war in Gaza. And the Trump administration is launching a $1 billion initiative aimed at making America's airports healthier and more family-friendly. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy rolled out the plan yesterday at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. Here are the details.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says his department will direct $1 billion towards grants that airports can use to improve the health and comfort of travelers.
So I'm announcing at DOT that we have $1 billion in funding for grant programs to make the experience better in airports.
Duffy said airports can decide what exactly the grants would be used for, suggesting facilities to benefit families and help passengers stay healthy.
I want to expand the play areas for kids. I want additional nursing pods for nursing mothers. Maybe I want a workout area where people might get some blood flow and doing some pull-ups or some step-ups.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joined Duffy, saying airports have long lacked healthy food choices for the roughly 3 million Americans who pass through them each day.
And I can tell you that this is where healthy diets go to die. The food that's available in the airport, a lot of it tastes very good, but it's not very good for you.
Kennedy said the new grants would encourage airports to have healthier options.
And one of the things that Secretary Duffy is encouraging these airports to do is to open up new options like the one you see behind you, Farmer's Fridge.
Kennedy also emphasized the need for better nursing accommodations, something he said many airports lack.
A lot of airports are not very family-friendly in that sense. And one of the projects that we're hoping that the airports will spend money on is improving the experience for mothers who want to travel with their babies.
Alongside healthier food and nursing spaces, the campaign promotes new exercise areas, with influencers like Dr. Paul Saladino arguing that even brief movement can reduce inflammation and improve traveler well-being.
I think the goal that we're thinking about is mini gyms, 3 to 5, 10 to 15-minute workouts. We don't need people to get sweaty. Can have a very positive health impacts, but a very positive mental impact, but less than 15 minutes.
The initiative is part of a push by the administration to improve airport experiences.
3, 4.
It follows Duffy's recent campaign asking travelers to be more respectful at airports and encouraging airlines to offer healthier options.
We're asking people to, again, maybe dress a little better. And I've asked airplanes to give some better options. It's all in the airline's purview, how they're going to respond to this.
Duffy said the changes won't happen overnight, but travelers can expect to see progressive improvements to the airport experience.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has issued a new executive order labeling the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, and the Muslim Brotherhood as foreign terrorist organizations. The order directs Florida agencies to block privileges, resources, or support for anyone tied to the groups. DeSantis alleges the Muslim Brotherhood has been helping finance Hamas terror activities using fundraising arms in the U.S. CAIR, meanwhile, is one of the largest Muslim civil rights groups in the U.S. The order alleges it was founded by individuals tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. CAIR and its Florida chapter called the move defamatory and unconstitutional, saying they will challenge it in court. The move follows similar actions in Texas last month, where Governor Greg Abbott issued his own designation, which prompted a federal lawsuit from CAIR. And last month, President Trump signed an order to begin the process of designating certain overseas chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood as foreign terrorist organizations. Texas leaders are pushing to expand Turning Point USA's Club America chapters into every high school campus in the state. Governor Greg Abbott says schools that block the clubs could face disciplinary action from the Texas Education Agency.
Already, more than 500 high schools have chapters. And with what Lieutenant Governor Patrick is doing, what the state is doing, will expand upon that. Let me be clear. Any school that stands in the way of a Club America program in their school should be reported immediately to the Texas Education Agency, where I expect meaningful disciplinary action to be taken place for any stoppage. This is about values. This is about constitutional principles. This is about a restoration of who we are as a country.
Abbott describes Turning Point USA's expansion as evidence of a cultural shift among teenagers. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has also tied the movement directly to Charlie Kirk's legacy, saying his message has intensified since his assassination. He said Club America now fills a void left by fading civic and faith institutions. The push in Texas comes as Turning Point reports tens of thousands of inquiries nationwide to start new chapters. The Texas initiative mirrors similar partnerships in Oklahoma and in Florida. And over in New York City, firefighters are responding to a blaze at an apartment building on Manhattan's Upper West Side. The FDNY posted an image on X showing flames erupting from windows on the top floor. Fire trucks cordoned off the scene as thick black smoke rose from the roof. The FDNY said the fire started at the 6-story building on 107th Street in Amsterdam this morning. The cause of the fire wasn't immediately known. We'll be keeping you updated there. Upcoming, former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is planning to run for office again next year. That's despite serving a 27-year prison sentence and being prohibited from running again. And the world's first social media ban is taking effect starting midnight. The consequences major platforms face if they don't block children under the age of 16 in Australia. Those stories after this. I'm Stephania Cox, and this is World Watch. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is planning to run for office again next year, despite serving a decades-long prison sentence. That's according to his son, Flavio Bolsonaro, who's a senator from Rio de Janeiro. He spoke to media earlier today.
I told him about the general mood of our activists, who are downcast, distressed, without a direction to follow. Now, President Bolsonaro has given us a direction. So I said that this candidacy is irreversible. His words are that we will not back down.
Bolsonaro is currently serving a 27-year-long prison sentence for allegedly plotting a coup after the 2022 election. Bolsonaro supporters entered government buildings on January 8 of 2023, very similar to the events of January 6 in Washington. Bolsonaro is also prohibited from running for office again. A court had already made that ruling before Bolsonaro was arrested and taken into custody. Many accuse Brazil's courts of exerting totalitarian powers similar to an autocracy. Bolsonaro is still planning to run for office despite being in prison and being prohibited from running. Japan, meanwhile, was assessing damage today after a late-night 7.5 magnitude earthquake hit Pacific coastal communities. Authorities said at least 34 people were injured. Most were hit by falling objects. The quake struck around 11:15 p.m. local time in the Pacific Ocean, around 50 miles off the coast of Aomori, the northernmost prefecture of Japan's main island. Tsunami advisories were lifted earlier today, but officials caution potential aftershocks may be coming in the upcoming days. Australia is the first country to ban social media for children under 16. The country is blocking access to platforms including TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook starting midnight. 10 of the biggest platforms face fines of over $30 million if they don't block children. The new law is drawing criticism from major technology companies and from free speech advocates. But parents and child advocates are welcoming the decision. Google is now facing a new antitrust investigation by the European Commission. That's over its use of publishers' online content and the use of YouTube videos to train its artificial intelligence models. Here's more on that.
The European Commission has opened an antitrust probe to assess whether Google is breaching EU competition rules. That's in its use of online content from web publishers and YouTube for artificial intelligence purposes. The Commission announced the news on Tuesday. It said the investigation will examine whether Google is distorting competition by imposing unfair conditions on publishers and content creators, or by granting itself privileged access to such content and placing developers of rival AI models at a disadvantage. The Commission further said it was concerned Google may have used content from web publishers to generate AI-powered services on its search results pages. That's without appropriate compensation to publishers and without offering them the possibility to refuse such use of their content. The Commission added it's also looking at whether Google has used content uploaded to YouTube to train its own AI models, and without offering creators compensation or the possibility to refuse.
Google has rejected the complaint by independent publishers in July, which triggered the EU investigation. A spokesperson said the complaint risks stifling innovation in a market that is more competitive than ever. Over to Southeast Asia, fighting renewed between Thailand and Cambodia has spread along the disputed border. Here's what happened today.
Thailand says it is taking action to expel Cambodian forces from its territory on Tuesday as renewed fighting spread along the disputed border. Each side has blamed the other for the clashes, which have derailed a fragile ceasefire brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump that ended 5 days of fighting in July. On Monday, Thai airstrikes targeted Cambodian positions housing long-range artillery after surveillance warned that rockets, including a Chinese-made variant, could be used to hit civilian areas. That was according to a Thai military official. The Thai Navy claims Cambodian forces were deploying snipers and heavy weapons, fortifying positions and digging trenches, and saw the actions as a direct and serious threat to Thailand's sovereignty.
Our military action will continue until Thailand's sovereignty and territorial integrity are not being compromised.
Cambodia's defense ministry said 2 civilians had been killed overnight, raising its death toll to 6, while Thailand reports 1 soldier dead. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet said late on Monday that Thailand must not use military force to attack civilian villages under the pretext of reclaiming its sovereignty. Cambodia said it had not retaliated, even after its forces came under sustained attack.
The second invasion activity by the Thai side clearly shows their intention to invade, grabbing their neighbors' country land by using a unilateral map and using force to change the border front line.
Thailand has evacuated about 438,000 civilians, while Cambodia reports similar large-scale relocations. The two countries have contested sections of their 508-mile border for more than a century, with disputes over ancient temples fueling nationalist tensions and sporadic clashes, including a deadly artillery exchange in 2011.
Coming up, more than 2,000 golden retrievers packed a Buenos Aires park as organizers attempted to set a new world record. We'll have that story and more up ahead. Welcome back. People in the northern U.S. could get quite a treat tonight. Scientists say some solar activity might make the northern lights visible. Now, that's just a prediction and not guaranteed. But if you want to look for the aurora, check around midnight. Other times you could see the phenomenon are just after sunset and before sunrise. States with the best chance of visible auroras include Alaska, Idaho, Maine, Michigan, New York, Washington, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. Quite a spread there. Parts of 15 states in total are within the possible viewing area. And in Argentina's capital, dog lovers packed a park yesterday as more than 2,000 golden retrievers gathered in an effort to set a new world record. The event was launched by an influencer who rallied followers on social media after recalling a similar meetup he once attended in Barcelona. The organizer said he began exploring how to certify such records days earlier and was surprised by the response in Buenos Aires. The organizer said the city had achieved a non-independently verified new world record for golden retriever attendance yesterday afternoon, with 2,397 dogs counted.
The main goal was to break the record. I believe we're going to surpass it. It's a record held by Vancouver with 1,685 golden retrievers. But beyond the record, it was about creating a day where we could share with our furry friends, be happy, and truly enjoy this crazy event.
To keep the massive meetup orderly, organizers asked owners to bring leashes, identification tags, water and waste bags, and reinforced those rules as the crowds grew. Attendees were also encouraged to donate pet food, adding a charitable aim to the festive gathering. Between photos, games, and a chorus of barks, the golden wave turned the park into one of the most striking scenes of the holiday. Next, a growing environmental problem is underway in Croatia. Every year, thousands of tons of coarse wool are discarded, and locals feel the negative impact. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on one Croatian entrepreneur transforming that waste into organic fertilizer.
This is Lika, a remote region in Croatia. Locals say that sheep have fed and clothed generations of people, but in recent decades, demand for wool has declined and a valuable resource has become waste. So in 2023, Croatian businesswoman Dragica Jurkov turned the problem into a business, opening a factory that turns discarded wool into organic fertilizer.
When we started the factory, we had no idea it was addressing a global problem. We only realized it when we began attending innovation fairs. That's when it became clear that we had solved something no one else in the world had managed to solve in the way we did.
Jurkov and her team of collaborators have patented several machines that clean and prepare wool for processing. One of their main innovations is a machine that sterilizes wool using ozone.
In the tent, the wool must rest for 2 months to allow any parasites and pests to die off. Then we use our patented industrial comber to remove impurities, as well as any remaining pests and parasites, ensuring they won't be ground into the fertilizer later. After that, ozone thermal sterilization takes place, lasting about 2 hours and reaching temperatures of up to 150 degrees Celsius.
Jurkov says her innovation is the result of cooperation with academics. At the Faculty of Agriculture in Zagreb, Gabriel Andrashek studies different doses of sheep wool pellets. He says tests show that wool has a positive effect on plant growth.
After sterilization, the wool can definitely be considered a high-quality organic fertilizer because it is, above all, safe to use and free from harmful side effects. Of course, it's very important to determine the correct doses and timing for each crop so that its use can be optimized for every type of plant production.
Yerkov says wool pellets benefit the soil, the plants, and even the atmosphere. Processing 100 tons of wool into fertilizer stores about 50 tons of carbon in the soil, carbon that would otherwise enter the atmosphere. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Students in Australia are converting cars into functioning spas, saunas, and steam rooms. In addition to their practical use, the project highlights the cultural importance of water within the Indigenous communities there. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the public art initiative.
Students at Montrose Bay High are working on old cars. Their project is called Wainapuni Pools, where Aboriginal students convert old vehicles into saunas, steam rooms, and heated pools.
The idea behind Wainapuni Pools is about bathing as a way of connecting to country and to each other. It's also about transforming these cars and reimagining them as vessels of care and connection.
Student Wyatt Rainey said the project was a team effort.
It was pretty hands-on, where you had to be hands-on to be able to do the project. Everyone had to play a part to be able to get these cars ready.
Student Briley Crossan explained the cultural importance behind the experience.
I think the project helped us all connect to culture just by understanding the capability that water does have and how much it was used by the Indigenous.
Ella is a car enthusiast. She says the project gave her a look under the hood.
I've always had a deep connection and interest in cars themselves, so getting to actually, rip the guts out of cars that I grew up in and see what the process is like to, transition these cars and give them a new life, I think that's really interesting.
After months of hard work, the public can now experience the unique bathhouse. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all we have time for this hour. But if you have any feedback on our show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'll cover more news right after this break.